association with the power companies. Say your last name right, Heather? Welcome. Take your time to set up and we'll start the clock.
Good evening and thank you for having us. I'm Donna Main. Many of you know me. I'm a citizen of Windsor, and with me is Heather Gingerich, our fluoride expert.
Well, I'd just like to say that I'm here not to make a presentation, but to be a community resource for the councilors and any other members of the media or the public who might be here. I'm recognized as an expert in environmental fluoride toxicity in North America by the United Nations, and the director of the International Medical Geology Association, and a PhD student at the University of Guelph School of the Environment.
And we're here. There's a lot of issues that water fluoridation has us concerned about, but tonight we're only talking about the environmental effects and legal implications. Artificial fluoridation is the addition of silicon fluorides to drinking water. It's the only thing we add to our water for the sole purpose of medicating us. Everything else is meant to clean the water. We began fluoridating in 1953 with a product called sodium fluoride. And for some reason, it was changed in the 60s to hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is actually more toxic than sodium fluoride. And we currently have fluoride concentrations at levels that average about 0.65 parts per million. Most often, hydrofluorosilicic acid is derived from the scrubbers of phosphate fertilizer production sites. It has co-contaminants of trace amounts of arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium, chromium, and radionuclides. Windsor actually has its own production site for hydrofluorosilicic acid. Not exactly sure where it is or how they do it, but we understand it's sourced from inside Windsor. Calcium fluoride should not be confused with hydrofluorosilicic acid. Many people try and confuse the issue by saying that fluoride is a naturally occurring element. It is, if it's calcium fluoride. That compound is very different. You can hold it with your bare hands, unlike the hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is highly corrosive. The chemical engineers, the water engineers that we have in the city need to wear special hazmat suits and respirators to handle it. They're, like we said before, it's highly corrosive, and it's about 20 times more toxic than calcium fluoride. The Canadian Environmental Protection Act classifies this silica fluoride as inorganic. It is bioaccumulative, which means it slowly accumulates in your body, wreaking havoc over time. It's toxic. It's classified as persistent and man-made. And this chart shows the relative toxicity. It is slightly more toxic than lead and only slightly less toxic than arsenic. And ironically, we're trying to eliminate lead and arsenic completely, but we add fluoride to our water. It would cost industry approximately $7,000 a ton to properly neutralize and dispose of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Instead, we pay to have it put in our drinking water. According to the Hazardous Waste Act, it is illegal to dump it anywhere in the environment. And yet, that's what we're doing when we artificially fluoridate our tap water. 99% of it returns to the ecosystem. We only consume about 1%. We estimate that it's approximately 4 million pounds a year that enters the Detroit River. And that is not including all the other sources that they get. According to Transport Canada, and this is one of the fields Heather is an expert in, it is, because it's highly corrosive, it has serious effects on plumbing fixtures, mostly. Is that my time already?
It's 5 minutes already.
Oh
Can
my
you wrap up,
goodness,
please?
Sure. Well, you know what? We'll skip to legislation. These are the 4 acts that artificial water fluoridation is ignoring. Safe Drinking Water Act that says dilution is no defense for adding a contaminant to drinking water. And all 4 acts follow the precautionary principle that any policy or suspected risk of causing harm to the public or the environment in the absence of scientific consensus, it's up to basically the person that's doing it, the council, to prove that it is not harmful. Windsor is licensed to fluoridate. They're not mandated to do it, and although Health Canada promotes it, they're not going to back you in case you get into this trouble here. The Safe Drinking Water Act, and this is a precedent set that we really want to warn everybody about. As of January 1st, 2013, there could be legal consequences and for negligence, including possible fines and imprisonment for council members personally if because they are responsible for fluoridating the water.
Thank you. In the interest of full disclosure, I was in Tecumseh last night where Dr. Hyman, the medical officer of health, was in attendance as well. There was a presentation, and Dr. Hyman refuted most of all the information presented. And I imagine when this comes to City Council at some point, there'll be 2 sides presented. I will say that Councillor Mara has raised fluoridation at Council and has asked the Windsor Utilities Commission to look at all the science available and issue a report. And at some point, WECEC will be doing that, doing their documentation, and Council will, at that point, either question what they're doing or validate what their report recommends. So at this stage, I don't know if there's questions of the delegation. Unless I'm wrong, I don't see anything that we do other than accept the minutes of the Environmental Committee and accept your presentation, but I don't know that there's any action item to flow. But I could be wrong. Councillor Halberstadt, Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I think it should be aired out at Council. Certainly the Environment Committee is urging the removal of the motion is create a bylaw to cease fluoridation of the water system as there are valid concerns regarding the potential adverse impact of fluoridation on the environment. But I can see passing that on to Council when Council debates it. But I do have a question, because I know when Donna and Heather came to the Environment Committee meeting where we addressed this issue, it was for environmental reasons rather than health reasons. But what I recall was there, and I don't know, Donna, if you've addressed this maybe in a clear way, what are the, and maybe Heather can answer this, the Clean Water Act, what does it, is there, I know we have a percentage in our water, Windsor water, of fluoride. What does the Clean Water Act say about the percentage, and is it within the, environment, I guess the Clean Water Act, or is it below the Clean Water Act or the Environmental Act that the province has, or the federal government?
The Clean Water, answer your question, the Clean Water Act actually specifically refers only to standards related to human consumption. And the fluoride standard for human consumption in water for either groundwater source or surface water source is 1.5 milligrams per liter, which has been determined. Many factions believe that that is still too high because it inadequately protects formula-fed infants, and they're people too. And that's the focus of my research at the University of Guelph. My project is on maternal-child health outcomes relative to drinking water chemistry, and regrettably, I have to say it's an under-researched area. We really don't know what the safe level of consumption is for the developing fetus or for formula-fed infants in critical stages of development. What we do know is, given the nature of the toxin, you're not likely to see a Walkerton-type night and day effect. You were fine, you had an exposure, you weren't fine. It was very clear what the problem was. Because it's bioaccumulative and persistent and global, it affects every system in the body. It could be years or decades before you see adverse effects, and by that point it would be very difficult to determine what the original cause was. So since this is a toxin that we're not in violation of any existing legislation pertaining to human drinking water standards, we are, however, in clear violation of legislation pertaining to protection of aquatic species. That, given the number of potential problems that we have, and this is one that we can clearly control. It's a point source. It is being intentionally added. We know it. It's just an easy one to eliminate because we're sort of in a Gulliver versus the Lilliputians type of scenario right now. There are so many factors impinging all at once. It's difficult to say which one of them is breaking the camel's back to really mix a bunch of metaphors together there. So we just recommend a precautionary principle. If you look at the fact that 7 out of 8 species of indigenous turtles are on the protected list, species at risk protected list, they are clear indicators that we're having some sort of water chemistry, water quality problem. Next on the list of effects are typically mammals, and it would be the smallest ones, like infants and developing fetuses.
But the actual Windsor's percentage of fluoride in the water is, I don't have it on the top of my head.
0.65 milligrams per liter.
Yeah.
Okay, and the species at risk,
0.12 milligrams per liter. It doesn't specify fluoride specifically, but species at risk stat says that you cannot endanger habitat or degrade habitat in any way. So the 0.12 milligrams per liter guideline comes from the Canadian Environment Canada, Canadian Water Quality Guidelines for the Protection of Aquatic Species.
Just one other question. You mentioned infants, and I know Leamington, we have the vice chair of WECEC is the deputy mayor of Leamington, since they've never had fluoride in the water, and the reason being that Heinz makes baby food, and basically way back when every other municipality was putting fluoride in, Leamington did not. Is that correct, because of the perceived risk to infants?
Yes, and that was probably based on the National Academy of Sciences dietary reference intakes, which states that the adequate fluoride intake, daily fluoride intake for an infant is 0.01 milligrams per day, and the upper toxic level would be 0.7 milligrams per day. So that translates into a water concentration. It would be different for a baby food because you're dealing with different units. But that would be, for an adequate intake, that would be a fluoride concentration of 0.0128 milligrams per liter, and an upper tolerance level of 0.09 milligrams per liter. So you're getting up really close to your in excess of about 50 times the adequate intake, and you're snuggling up really close to the toxic level.
Just in the interest of fairness and full disclosure, there was a dentist who spoke last night about children in Leamington needing surgery, and letters from, or a letter from a dentist in Leamington introduced as well, who said that the lack of fluoridation in the water up there is leading to some problems that have to be repaired by the dental community. In the interest of fairness, that was stated last night, despite what we've heard today. So there is so much conflicting information, and I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful, Donna, that you're raising this in the community, and at some point we'll deal with it. It won't be dealt with as such at this committee today. Are there further questions? Councillor Haberstadt, Councillor Payne.
That was my next question, actually, was going to be on the dental, I guess the dental college. Do they have a benchmark with regard to quantity of fluoride that they recommend in our water?
Well, they have the recommendations, but what they don't have is any studies that compare dental health outcomes in fluoridated versus non-fluoridated communities. So they really haven't conducted any research to compare apples to apples in terms of saying, here's a community of a similar size, socioeconomic profile, this kind of thing, fluoridated and one that isn't fluoridated, and let's compare to see who's better. What we do know is that in major cities where this has been done because the numbers are large, non-fluoridated Vancouver has a lower rate of dental caries than fluoridated Toronto.
So what is the dental college recommendation? Is it at the Windsor quantity of 0.65, or is it higher or lower? They not being a dentist, I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that. And
Thank you. Another question?
I agree to get that.
Well, yeah, but we can't get it from this delegation.
Before we can ask that first.
Well, I would think at council there will be, as I say, for every study, there's a reverse study, there's another study, and you know this. So, yeah, I'm sure there will be someone at council that will have information that you can challenge, and they can challenge your information, and at some point, when the Utilities Commission will issue a report, as they've been asked to do, and come to council, or be decided at the Utilities Commission and give us a flat-out recommendation. I know Councillor Sleeman is dealing with it at the Utilities Commission. So at some point, we'll have all the information in front of us instead of part of the information.
May I make a comment?
Just if you're asked a question, but right now we're in questions by councillors, and I have Councillor Payne, Councillor Sleeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been involved in this to some degree too, through the being on the board of the health unit, and I've received a lot of information from Mr. Young, which is also part of the Environmental Action Network, and I've also seen all of Dr. Hyman's responses, and if there's one conclusion that comes out of that is that the two sides will never ever agree on this, and so I certainly agree that the best thing to do is to have their presentation and Dr. Hyman's on the same occasion. Not that that will, I think, bring any agreement between the two parties, but it would at least help the council or the committee to evaluate these competing claims.
Thank you, Councillor Sleeman.
Thank you. Kind of listening to you and listening to other people, emailing us, listening to kind of two opposing people to the same issue here.
Can you turn your mic on?
Yes, this is my question. Sorry. I'm looking at, there's no page number on it, but here it is, calcium fluoride versus hydrofluoric acid. And trying to see here, one of them is the calcium fluoride naturally occurring and is safe to handle by hands. The other one is a man-made toxic and is corrosive. This is the main argument, basically using that man-made compared to naturally occurring. If I may remind you, like medication itself, most of it is man-made, made of chemicals and so on. Does it make it not healthy for a human being?
Sure does.
So I just need you to comment on it, and, I mean, is it really a valid argument to say if it's naturally occurring or it's man-made?
I think because many pharmaceuticals and therapeutic compounds are naturally occurring, that was the original basis of medicine. So it's not uncommon to use natural substances as remedies. However, in this case, I think the issue is the substance that's being used, hydrofluorosilicic acid. It has had demonstrated toxic effects on other aspects of our environment. And since, given the citizens' concern about the air quality and the water quality, and their clearly demonstrated concern about the environment, I think there are better ways. We have a wonderful public health unit here, and there are provincially funded programs directed specifically for those at-risk, low-income children who suffer the most from tooth decay. They're called the Healthy Smiles Program and Children in Need of Care, where you can actually get fluoride, professionally applied fluoride treatments paid for by the province. And we think that the problem is that perhaps these programs are undersubscribed, so we would really like to collaborate and support the health unit in reaching the children or the families that really need this, in which case we would no longer have to administer this without everybody's consent through the water supply and possibly endanger aquatic species and put yourselves in a liability position in case of, in the event of environmental and human health damage from the fact that you're administering a substance. Yes, the primary component with which you're interested in may be a naturally occurring element, but certainly the form in which you package it is not.
It's
And
just one
in an
kind of
uncontrolled
comment
dose.
on what you were saying. Maybe we are the decision makers here. You are expert in your field. We have a lot of doctors, the medical society, the dental society. They're also expert in that field as well. Isn't it really better if your organization or yourself try to maybe to work with those doctors, try to convince them? And so when we have recommendations, it will be kind of, hopefully, I'm looking at possibly unanimous recommendation coming from both. But with us, I mean, I am an engineer, somebody else is a planner, or somebody else is have a different field. We are not expert in this field. We always rely on people who know this stuff.
Is that a
My
question to the
recommendation-
delegation, Councillor Singh?
Yeah, it's just kind of to go back and talk to the expert.
Right, thank you. Are there further questions, or are we at that point? Would either of you or both of you care to conclude with a closing comment?
Great. I would just like to say that I agree wholeheartedly with the committee member, Mr. Sleeman, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We are not at odds with public health and Dr. Hyman. We are very concerned about children's oral health and the oral health of the community. However, we don't feel it needs to be at the expense of the environment and those who are at risk of overexposure. So we're working at a collaborative solution so that it makes your decision very easy and that we reach consensus.
And I will say that last night, again, Councillor Hyman, when we were talking about the .05 and .012 or whatever on the levels, he stated, I believe, that the discharge rate from, say, Lou Romano of fluoride levels is much below the .65. It drops down to the aquatic species. He didn't say that?
He did not say that, no. There is no sampling below the discharge point of the Lou Romano plant. We have sampling above, and we know that the water coming into the municipal system is at a level of 0.1 milligrams per liter, so just under the 0.12 guideline. And we know what we add, but we don't know what's going into the system at the residential level from toothpaste, metabolized pharmaceuticals, cleaning solvents, whatever.
Well, do we know what the intake is in Amherstburg, which the next, the intake down. If Windsor, well, I didn't want to get into it, but in the future, I will ask
That
if the
sample
intake
would be
level
very
in
good.
Amherstburg is higher than what intake level in Windsor. And you would think it would be if the discharge rate in Windsor was as high as you're suggesting it is.
Absolutely, but any point along the water course, as being over 0.12 that is below, that would be considered the responsibility of Windsor.
Thank you. And I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Halberstadt, Councillor Sneeman, and the motion is?
Yeah, that the report number, is it 59, be received and passed along to City Council when that debate takes place.
Thank you. And a friendly amendment perhaps with a report from legal on the validity of the claim that individual members of council can be sued after January the 1st, 2013, I believe it is, whatever the date was. There may be some question about that, but I'll hear from legal on that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the amended motion? Opposed, if any, that carries. Thank you for coming. And if you know Lee's Bircher and Guelph, please say hello for me. Candidate